We're studying the book of Amos and we have reached chapter 2 and verse 6. There have been clear warnings from the roaring lion. That's a reference to God. The picture says that God isn't going to put up with what is happening anymore. There's a message to nations round Israel, including Judah, for the atrocities against human dignity. God, because of his compassion, just can't sit by watching it continue. The northern tribes of Israel is 10 tribes contrasted with Judah in the south, which included the little tribe of Benjamin. Israel probably applauded Amos as he spoke out because they believed that these other nations around about them were wicked, and it was about time God stepped in and did something. They were also living in a time of great prosperity and peace. In their minds, that translated into thinking that God is very happy with us because blessing meant God is pleased with us. So they would have been shocked when the Lord says, "For 3 sins of Israel, even for 4, I will not turn back my wrath." Now this judgment formula comes 7 times, and now Israel hears it. Not just the nations around them, it's coming to them. What's the problem? They sell the righteous for silver and the needy for a pair of sandals. Now the law was very clear. If someone had a need, it was the responsibility of those with more to lend and not to charge interest. Today, a bank or a lending agency charges interest, and there's nothing wrong with that. When Paul wrote, "Let no debt remain outstanding," taking out a loan on a house is not a debt. It's a contract. Everybody understands the terms, and it helps people. It only becomes a debt when breaking the terms. But it was not a business transaction in ancient Israel, but a way to hold the community together so that they survived. But here, people were trying to hold things together, and the wealthy were offering loans. But the moment they couldn't immediately pay back the loan, they would sell them into slavery. They would go to the judicial system saying, "This person owes me and can't pay." And the verdict was, sell them into slavery. These are husbands, wives, mothers, fathers, brothers, sisters. The wealthy sell the righteous for money and the needy for a pair of sandals. The needy are the poor, the orphan, the immigrant, the at-risk. And a pair of sandals was a Hebrew cliche meaning they were sold into slavery for next to nothing. So do you see this? Here you have the wealthy living lives of luxury with more sandals than they know what to do with, and they sell someone into slavery for next to nothing just because they can and to advantage themselves. They have no compassion. And when these people appeal to the legal system, which is the only place they can turn, the legal system has been bought out by the wealthy, and the verdict always goes in favour of the rich. There's nowhere to turn. You have a handful of people advantaging themselves at the cost of the social fabric of the community, and father and son use the same girl and so profane my holy name. They loan money that can't be paid back. They sell them into slavery, and then, as a slave girl, both the father and the son have their way with this girl. A total lack of human dignity describes this community. You know, it's interesting that Amos brings up sexual sin in the context of social justice. Now, we don't tend to think of it that way, but when you think about it, what is sexual sin as defined by God other than it's stealing? It's taking something that doesn't belong to you with the understanding that it's something you can never give back. It's understanding that even if two people are consenting adults, and this is where we are as a culture, as long as both people are consenting, it doesn't hurt anybody. That is ridiculous. It hurts everybody. Our sexual promiscuity as a nation is causing the social fabric of our communities to completely unravel. Think about it. Billions of finance goes to deal with the promiscuity, the diseases, the sexual violence, the addictions, to deal with families with no dads. Billions of finance is spent because of sexual promiscuity. It's people choosing to advantage themselves to the disadvantage of the community. And frankly, if we could get our sexual lives in order, there would be millions and millions to help those who genuinely need it. It's the core of social justice. And just before we point our finger at injustices around the world, let's remember social justice starts at home. Social justice means we need to operate our lives with a discipline of sexual integrity. The abuse of the poor, selling people into slavery, the corruption of the justice system, the sexual promiscuity, it all does violence to the name and reputation of God. And these are supposed to be the people of God. How could they possibly treat people like this? You see what God is saying? You are just making a mockery of my name. These wealthy people are abusing others and pretending to be good religious people. Back then, if somebody owed you money and couldn't pay you back, you had the right to take their garment as collateral. But the law required at the end of every day you must give that garment back so they don't freeze to death at night. You take it back in the morning. But instead of giving it back, they used it as a mattress to sleep on. And not only do they not give the garment back, they have a house full of garments, but they don't want to soil their own garments. So they ruin the poor man's garment so that theirs hang in pristine condition. A total disregard for another human being for the sake of having more. If someone paid a fine with money or wine, both were options, they were giving what they had, and these judges were required to put the money in the budget in order to help meet needs. But instead of doing that, they were having a party and getting drunk on the wine. So here they are, up at the altar, pretending to be good religious people, having this big party, getting drunk on what was needed in order to care for others. And why is this heartbreaking for God? In verses 9 to 12, God explains, this is so offensive, because if it wasn't for me, you wouldn't have any of this, God is saying. You wouldn't even be a nation. You wouldn't have peace and prosperity. You wouldn't have a life. I'm the one that made you into a nation. I'm the one that led you out of Egypt. I'm the one that led you in the wilderness. I'm the one that conquered the enemy. I'm the one that led you into the land. I'm the one who has taken care of you and prospered you. If it wasn't for me, you wouldn't have anything. And this is what you do with what has been given. Nazarites were people who took a vow to be set apart. No wine, no lots of things, in order to be set apart for God. They wanted to be a living metaphor. They were like a thermostat in a nation of thermometers. They didn't reflect the cultural temperature, they helped to make it. Every culture needs people who set a standard to gauge things by. And they constantly reminded the people, we are all to be set apart people for God. But they corrupted the Nazarites, turning them into drunkards. And God says, I sent prophets to tell you what you need to know, that you're off track, and here's what I want. But you put a gagging order on the prophets and won't let them speak. After all I have done for you. This is how you respond. And it breaks God's heart. One of the things that's interesting in the Old Testament is to look at the terminology used for giving to the poor, the orphan, and the widow. When we think of doing that, we think in terms of generosity and giving to a charity. But when you look at the Old Testament terminology, the term that's used is justice, mishpat. It's saying this isn't just being generous, this isn't charitable giving, this is the right thing to do. Because at the end of the day, God gave it to you. You didn't earn it or deserve it. 99% was God's and maybe 1% is yours in terms of what was necessary to have what you have. Now, people say, just wait a minute. I worked really hard. I save. I make good decisions. Fine. That's 1%. 99% you had no control over. You couldn't control what century you were born in, what family you were born into, what country you were born in. You didn't have anything to say about whether you would struggle with some lifelong disease or be healthy most of your life. You have no say in whether you will be hit by a drunk driver or not. You have no say in whether you have cancer, diabetes, or any other disease. You see, at the end of the day, those things are in God's hands. And we have our 1%. And if we think we are in control and we are the reason for all that we have, what happens tomorrow when the doctor calls and says it's cancer? We suddenly realize there's little in life we control. We have what we have, and it's a reflection of God's goodness and generosity. And in the same way, those that have little, the orphan, widow, immigrant, and the poor, it's the same argument. Those little children living in poverty, it wasn't their choice. It's true that people make bad choices. And we can identify bad decisions in any group of people. But the overwhelming majority of these people didn't choose that. And God is saying, those of you that have, you didn't really choose that. That's my goodness. And those that struggle, that really wasn't their choice either. So, in the name of human dignity, can't we all get along by looking out for each other? As a people made in the image of God, can't we treat people with dignity? Can't there be protection? Can't there be compassion? The end of the day, it's justice. It's simply the right thing to do. It's the way we love our neighbour as ourselves. Failing to do this, God says, I will crush you as a cart crushes when loaded with grain. Just imagine a wagon that's way overloaded and the wheels wobble and it's barely able to move, and grain falls off and gets crushed under the wheels. That's going to be you as a nation. You are about to feel the weight of my judgment and barely able to function. You're going to go from luxury and prosperity to this weight of my judgment. The swift, the strong, the warrior, the archer, the fleet-footed soldier, the horseman, even the bravest warriors will flee naked on that day, declares the Lord. You can run, but you can't hide. You're not going to win or avoid this. And here's the truth of the matter. This prophecy was fulfilled about 25 to 28 years later in 722 BC. The Assyrians invaded and captured Israel, desolated the land and hauled them into years of captivity. Okay, what do we do with what we've just read? What do we learn from this? Well, we as God's people don't run the government or the judicial system. We can't just apply straight over from that environment to ours. But how God felt then is the same way God feels about this kind of thing today. There is always going to be those that are disadvantaged by structures and systems. There's always going to be those that cry out for human decency. And what doesn't change is the fact that it breaks the heart of God. And God expects his people to hear that cry and to do what we can do to make the social fabric of a community work. Think of it this way. What if tomorrow morning, when you go on your way, you begin to look for all the ways in which social injustice manifests itself in your world? How does it show up in your neighborhood? How does it show up in your school? What do you see showing up in your workplace or your business? How does it show up wherever you are involved yourself? And instead of shrugging our shoulders and saying, well, that's too bad, but that's just the way it is. What if, as the people of God, we begin to dream about what could be different in our circle of influence? What could be different if we really cared and begin to think about how we could change this one person at a time? You know, the fact is, as a church, we penetrate into every area of our community one way or another. We penetrate into the schools, into the medical world, into the business world. We penetrate into everything. So really, what would happen if the people of God begin to look at our community and say, these are the areas where there are behaviours that are not right and not fair. They don't give people a chance. And what would it be like if we began to dream about what could be different? There is only one us, with our skills, touch, voice and style. And you know what? History is full of accounts of single individuals who made a difference. Think about it. One vote gave Oliver Cromwell control of England, removing the monarchy. One vote led America to adopt the English language instead of the German. One vote changed France from a monarchy to a republic. One vote gave Adolf Hitler control of the Nazi Party. As a poet expressed it, I am only one, but still I am one. I cannot do everything, but still I can do something. And because I cannot do everything, I will not refuse to do something that I can do. The government will never be the answer, and I mean no disrespect to the government. I think especially with local governments, there are people sincerely trying to help a community. But at the end of the day, we must own this fact. There are the things that in the name of humanity must change. And what will happen if we begin to dream about how God might use us to change the people in our circle of influence? Back in the 13th century, in Germany, there was a saying summed up how one little thing can lead to a bigger thing. In more recent years, it's been known as the butterfly effect, the butterfly effect. The flapping of a butterfly wings in Brazil will impact the weather in Bulgaria. Now, it can be taken too far, but listen to the old saying. For want of a nail, the shoe was lost. For want of a shoe, the horse was lost. For want of a horse, the rider was lost. For want of a rider, the battle was lost. For want of the battle, the kingdom was lost. And all for the want of a horseshoe nail. The lack of one horseshoe nail could be inconsequential, or it could indirectly cause the loss of a war. There is no way to predict which outcome will occur, but grasp this point. One little thing we do has a chain effect. And remember, just because something is legal, it doesn't mean something is morally right. It's very common for people in certain industries to say, that's just the way the industry does it. But what if it doesn't give those who are vulnerable a fair chance? What about my business? What about my school system? What about my neighbourhood? Just look in my world and say, what is not right here? We do have a realistic possibility of dramatically changing our own community. And if we change our community, maybe we could change our area. And if we change our area, maybe it will flow over to surrounding areas. And who knows what God might do. We could change our community for good, giving people a glimpse of God's world to come as we proclaim the message of Jesus through what we say and what we do. And it starts with one person at a time. It begins when we pray and mean the words of Jesus. Do to others what you would have them do to you. That's been called the golden rule. There is a silver rule that has been around for years. What you do not want done to yourself, do not do to others. Confucius taught that. It's not a bad rule, but Jesus is more positive. We are not asked to be nice to others to benefit ourselves. In fact, it might do the opposite. So why do this? Because we live for our Heavenly Father's approval. I can't keep this rule without help, but God will give us that help. His divine power has given us everything we need for life and godliness. We can go into this week knowing that we will connect with people, some superficially and others more deeply. Make this our prayer. Father, equip me by your Spirit to make a difference for the better in each life I meet. By God's power, I am determined that what I want others to do for me, whether they do it or not, I will do for them. I will start asking myself what I would want in a situation. Then I will do it. Charlie Brown is a kind-hearted, do-good kind of character in the cartoon strip Peanuts. He continues to practice the golden rule, even though it rarely works in his advantage. Charlie Brown keeps doing for others what he would have them do for him. In one strip, Charlie and Lucy are lined up behind a bunch of other kids to see a movie. "Have you been here long, Charlie Brown?" Lucy asks. "No, I just got here. Actually, I shouldn't be going to the movies at all. I have homework to do. If it weren't for the fact that they're giving away free candy bars to the first 1,500 kids, I wouldn't even be here." Lucy has been listening to the counting of the ticket agent and asks, "Do you mind if I get ahead of you, Charlie Brown?" "No, please do. Ladies first is always my motto." Lucy pays for her ticket. 1,500, announces the ticket agent. "Sorry, kid, that's the way it goes." And the world is full of Lucys. When we practice the golden rule, don't do it for them. Do it for your Father in heaven. He pays with more than candy bars.